Well, that's amazing, isn't it? I mean, the Aussies in the top 10 again, eh? But, I mean, you see the other ones there, New York and Brussels and Copenhagen, Tokyo, Hong Kong. They're all very large populations, very densely populated. So you probably would expect Sydney to be up there as Australia's global city, but Perth is a surprise. There's only 2 million people in Perth. So that's got to be partly structural and partly to do with state government taxes.
So when we break down the factors that might be involved here, looking at things like population density, obviously, what are the other factors that might be coming into play where we're seeing a real push for parking spaces in demand?
Well, you're right, it's partly population, it's partly the structure of the city. Places like Sydney and Perth and Seattle and Hong Kong that are basically got a lot of water, they're ibbity-pibbity, so that tends to determine parking. And also, to some extent, your local regulations. So some cities decide they want people not to park. They provide very good public transport, and they tax you, such as London with the charge they have to drive in London, whilst others make it relatively easy for you to park.
I couldn't believe it. I started having a bit of a look on the internet. There are websites dedicated to selling or renting car spaces in Sydney.
Well, that's the amazing thing about the internet, isn't it? Because economics is about markets. And if you can provide free, perfect information, you'll get the best price. And so the internet actually does make it better. And in San Francisco, you've got that SF Park scheme where you use your mobile phone to find where there's a free park in San Francisco. So it actually makes a lot of sense.
And I was interested to see, when having a little bit of a look at what prices were for car spaces that are for sale in the Sydney CBD area. I mean, I saw one car space for sale, I think, right in the heart of the city for $93,000.
Oh, that's a steal.
It's an incredible market that we're seeing emerging, I suppose, with car spaces.
Well, that is demand and supply. I mean, Sydney's a global city. People want to be conveniently located in the place. Alternative public transport is variable, so you probably can expect that. What's interesting is a place like Los Angeles once had the world's greatest public transport system, and the car lobby basically wanted to get the state to build freeways. And so that's why you don't see the great trams that you used to see in Los Angeles, in the 30s and 40s. So it's partly the political economy where the car lobby, they want them to build the freeways and the tollways. They will put pressure on the state not to provide alternative public transport. So you've seen that happen.
Well, in Sydney, we're probably bemoaning the loss of our trams, for instance. They're
coming back.
The tram to Bondi, for instance. I'm sure people would be wishing that they had that sort of service. Parking prices in Bondi are also at a premium. But in terms of the fact that, we are seeing quite such a push, do you think that Australians are going to have to come to terms with its love affair with the car and put that aside and maybe push more in terms of things like public transport?
I think that's right. I think for suburb to city commuting, I think certainly public transport, new forms of light rail that we're going to have to Kensington and the SCG, they will provide an alternative. But I don't think you're going to wean off the Aussies from the car. For suburb to suburbs, going into the country, going away from weekend trips, we're built for cars, Australia. But I think for going to the city and commuting, I think public transport will become more and more attractive as car parking gets more expensive, as we're seeing.
Do you think how other cities, say, for instance, Rome, handle their situation? You see a lot of people in European cities opting for scooters, for instance, as a way of getting around. Is that something that we might see a bit more of?
We might see the mods come back. They haven't been around since the 60s, but look, my sister lives in Rome, and the way they drive in Rome and the way they park, the touch parking is quite something to behold. So if I was living in Rome, I wouldn't go near a car. certainly driving one. But I think the other thing too is the rent a bike scheme you're now seeing in London and other cities, even now in Adelaide, where people can pick up bicycles for the city, make a lot of sense, particularly in Australia, which doesn't have a particularly harsh climate in the wintertime, certainly.
On your bike. Well, the future of parking in Sydney is something that we'll all have to keep our eye on. Thank you so much, Tim Harcourt.
My pleasure, thank you.